her. Let's go to this with Howard Fineman joining us right now. I want to read to you right now a classic example of a Friday afternoon news dump. It's Mitt Romney releasing his tax returns for last year. He paid an effective rate of 14.1%, which is below the rate we know that people pay of payroll taxes. Anyway, the campaign also released a summary of his taxes for the past 20 years, a summary. They say Romney paid an average of 20.2%, and they say he never paid less than 13.6%. Republican strategist Alex Castellanos had a strong response to the campaign's move. He told the Politico, quote, "At first I thought this was an April Fool's joke, but it isn't April. I can't imagine that David Axelrod will now say, I'm glad Mitt put this issue behind him. This will drag Mitt's taxes right back into the debate, and there's not many days left. I just can't imagine why they would do this." Howard, why would they do? I know they said they're going to release the current year's or last year's returns, and they did that, showing he pays less than the average guy he says is one of the victim class who only pays payroll taxes. He pays less, it turns out. But why would they tease us with this Judge Stennis solution, like Nixon did in the old days, of saying, well, I won't tell you what the taxes I paid were for the last 10 or 12 years, but here's a little hint of what I claim I paid. Why would you do this?
Well, Chris, I'm tempted to say they've had such a bad run that they wanted to sort of get all the bad stuff out there right away. But at the end of this week, but as Alex Castellanos pointed out, this won't end the discussion. And I think if you look closely at what Mitt Romney did in his 2011 taxes, as we've done at the Huffington Post, you could see he disallowed just enough of the deductions he was going to take for his charitable contributions to inch it over 14%, but no more. So if we calculated that the White House is worth $200,000 to him because that's what he paid to get it over 14%, and then, of course, in tax law, he can claim those deductions later on. In other words, he forewent $2 million worth of tax deductions. He can amend his taxes over the next 3 years, and I'll bet you anything that he does, he'll eventually take that tax deduction. Everybody's going to sit around doing these kinds of calculations, and it just brings up the whole, this in conjunction with the videotape, the 47% of pay no taxes versus this, just doesn't solve any problems for him at all politically.
You know, Joey, this strikes me as the word cute, a good four-letter word for this. Very cute to put out only what you promised to put out, not to put out 10 or 12 years, and then to give this little sketchy look at what you say you did, and then, as Howard points out, have this trapdoor. We can even grab the money if you lose the election in this year's returns.
Yeah, you know, Chris, I think that literally what the Romney campaign was trying to do with this Friday document dump was to replace the smell of decay with the smell of tax return. This is a classic sort of move to try to get the Howard Finemans of the world, to get the political media to chase these returns, to spend now time digging into Mitt Romney's tax returns and just the barest minimum of the tax returns to stop the story and the bleeding that's happening over the last 2 weeks of terrible news.
Why do you think knowing that he won't give us the information about the tax returns improves the story? Joy.
That's the problem. I mean, they know that the tax return story is a bad news story, but it's the returns previous to 2011 that Harry Reid and others are speculating Romney paid even less than 14%, and Harry Reid sort of, you know, smoke and mirrors thing, maybe even zero. So this doesn't help, but I think that they've decided that because this return shows that he paid some taxes, at least it will take away the talking point that, well, you're one of the 47%. Mitt Romney, you didn't pay any taxes.
Well, he paid less than people, you know, Joy, you know, he paid less than you pay payroll taxes,
which the people who don't pay taxes at the federal
income level do pay when they go to work. Well, you know,
Chris,
paper boys pay that. Yeah.
Chris, it's a little bit like firefighting. You, if you're out of a forest fire, you build a backfire to try to stop the bigger fire. That's sort of what they did here. They set a second fire to try to stop the spread of the first.
Well, we're going to get back to that tax story again and again, whether Romney likes it or not. Anyway, today President Obama gave a strong rebuke for Mitt Romney over his 47% comments that got out this week. Let's watch the president.
In 2008, 47% of the country didn't vote for me. But on the night of the election, I said to all those Americans, I may not have won your vote, but I hear your voices, I need your help, and I will be your president. The values we believe in don't just belong to workers or businesses, the 53% or the 47%, the rich or the poor, the 1%, the 99%. These are American values. They belong to all of us.
Meanwhile, down in New Orleans at an AARP annual conference, Paul Ryan got booed by the audience when he talked about repealing Obamacare. Let's listen.
The first step to a stronger Medicare is to repeal Obamacare, because it represents the worst of both worlds. I had a feeling there would be mixed reaction.
Well, what do we make of that, Howard? I mean, here's a group of older people. Now, what I keep looking at is the polls that show that the only age group that supports Mitt Romney are 65 and older. That's it. If people under retirement age got to vote only, he'd get killed. So the fact is, why is he out there going to war through his VP nominee with older people, saying get rid of Obamacare? Why is he stirring this up?
Well, he's speaking to the wrong audience in going after Obamacare, Chris. I think the attack on Obamacare worked to some extent in the 2010 congressional races when they focused on the fact that some tax money would be necessary and that some Medicare spending would be cut. Remember, that's what they used in 2010, and that worked. But the people that worked with were not the seniors. That worked with swing voters and younger voters who were, looking at how that was going to play out. So I think to go into the teeth of the activists at the AARP with that argument was going to elicit boos. You knew that was going to happen. And again, you ask, why would they want to do that kind of thing? Why would they want to get booed at the AARP? I can't imagine any positive. This is not like a Sister Souljah moment from the Clinton years. It makes no political sense whatsoever.
Speaking of Bill Clinton, let's watch something for Bill Clinton, because once again he's come in and clarified something that was murky. This whole thing. In 30-some states around the country, the Republican legislatures have gone out there and tried to restrict the rights of people to vote, limit the number of hours you can vote early, limit the opportunity to vote different ways, have to show more documentation. Clearly a partisan effort. Now here's Bill Clinton saying this is still a big concern with him, especially down in Florida, but also in Pennsylvania. Let's watch Bill get to the heart of this.
How much will the vote be lessened or reduced by the fact that in Florida, except for 4 counties, the pre-election voting, advance voting, has been cut down to 8 days and doesn't include the Sunday before the election, which is an arrow aimed straight at the heart of the African American churches who pull up the church buses on the Sunday before election and take elderly people who have no cars or people who are disabled to the polls so they can vote. How much is all that going to affect the turnout? In my lifetime, nobody's ever done anything quite this blatant.
Quite this blatant, Joy. What I don't understand, and I'm going to get ethnic here, why white people don't hear the whistle here. They don't see not just the whistle, but the changing of the law, the changing of the goal line, really, for getting ready to vote or being able to vote, because they see these people in these legislatures. Here's a chance to screw the black voter. Here's a way to get. They have this tradition of voting at their church. People don't have private transportation. They get on the church buses. They go from church, perhaps, in a black church. They go and vote that Sunday. A nice tradition, very democratic. And then the Republicans say, oh, I know how to screw these people. We're going to take away that Sunday before the election. And it's so blatant, as Bill says, Bill Clinton.
No, it's incredible, Chris. And I mean, you look at a state like Florida where they literally legislated every single kind of voting except absentee, which is the one kind of voting Republicans do well in, and the one kind of voting, by the way, where you actually do see fraud. Right now, the Miami-Dade election, paper absentee ballot, where people are going to nursing homes and filling out the ballots for people with Alzheimer's and turning them in. That's the kind of fraud you actually see in Florida, not legislated by the Republicans in Florida. You have in Ohio, where you're literally having precincts with majority Democrats getting less time to vote. They're doing it that blatantly. And Chris, I'm not sure that white voters don't see this. I think that the blatantness of this, the obvious sort of racial going after Latino voters and African American voters, Americans, in 2012 are not for that kind of thing. People don't see any problem with having to show an ID. I think on that level, people don't have a problem with voter ID. But when you have Republican legislators literally saying this is going to help Mitt Romney get elected, I think that hurts them with white swing voters as much as it does energize African Americans and Latinos to defend their right to vote.
Well, Howard, I don't know. You and I hear it. I hear it. I hear what Joy hears, but I'm surrounded by people, maybe you are too, white people, who just love to say, oh, tut-tut, that isn't true. Why are you hearing things we don't hear? I think they hear it because it's directed at them. These what do you call them, these dog whistles are aimed at white people. They're not aimed at black people. They're aimed directly at white sensitivities and anger and resentments and all that old stuff. Here's a way to rip the scab off and get you to vote against a black guy. That's my thought, and maybe that's Joy's thought. She's shaking her head. Is it your thought? Are we surrounded by people who are deaf or just politically resistant to the truth?
Well, I would like to agree. I would like to think that what Joy said is right about America in 2012, but I'm not entirely sure that's true, and certainly not true everywhere. And some people might enjoy the prospect. The fact is that over the last 20 years or so, voting rights have been expanded, or voting hours have been expanded, voting days and weeks have been expanded, in the interests of getting people to participate, which after all should be an American ideal. And has that benefited the Democrats in some places? Yes. But what reducing those hours and reducing those days does is run against the idea of participation and fair play.
One thing I have to do here, let's show this guy who pushed through the Pennsylvania law. You want to hear it clear? Howard, and everybody watching, you think there's not some ethnic factor, racial factor? Watch this guy, Darryl Metcalfe. He's the guy that pushed that law, the photo voter ID card. Here's his explanation, what he thinks of the people who don't have those cards.
I don't believe any legitimate voter that actually wants to exercise that right and takes on the according responsibility that goes with that right to secure their photo ID will be disenfranchised. You know, we have, as Mitt Romney said, I mean, we have 40-some% of the people that are living off the public dole, living off of their neighbors' hard work, and we have a lot of people out there. They're too lazy to get off and to get up and get out there and get the ID they need. So, I mean, if individuals are too lazy, the state can't fix that. But the process is put in place to get an ID card. There's a free ID available if somebody needs one. And there's a process they have to go through. They have to present certain documents. That's the way it should be.
There you have it, Howard Fineman. Clear as a bell. That guy's not using a dog whistle. Thank you, Howard Fineman. Thank you, Joy Ann Reid.
That's a bullhorn. That's a bullhorn.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say so.
And it comes from the same place as that 47% argument, the welfare queens argument. It's all about saying we're going after, somebody that's being demonized as these lazy welfare queens. They can't vote. They're abusing food stamps. It's all part of the same argument.
I'm with you, Joy. Coming up, see how they